Sony just had their most recent state of play earlier this week, which left me mostly underwhelmed. It felt like Sony was scrambling a bit to show highlights at this presentation, with one particular sour note actually being the first game they revealed, Concord, a brand new multiplayer 5v5 hero shooter being developed by Firewalk Studios in their debut first title. Whatever your opinions are on the game, needless to say, it hasn't sat well with the overall community. 12 hours after the airing of the state of play, and the Concord trailer was sitting at about only 20% likes, and it's a far cry compared to the Astrobot trailer, which looked great by the way, sitting at universal acclaim with its like ratio. Sony must have felt very confident in Concord. It was the first game to be revealed. It had the longest segment in the entire show, with a CGI and gameplay trailer, as well as a little bit of developer commentary. So what went wrong? I'm no expert. I've never developed a big budget AAA game by myself, nor have I marketed one, but the second the Concord trailer started playing, it immediately wasn't working for me. I think it's usually a big mistake to reveal any brand new IP with just a CGI trailer, as it doesn't tell the audience much of anything about the actual game. But beyond the disappointing trailer, people in the community expressed disappointment with the reveal that Concord is a competitive hero shooter akin to Overwatch and Valorant. To add insult to injury for Concord and the rest of the state of play, Marvel Rivals, another team-based hero shooter releasing soon, showcased their own trailer in the state of play later, just rubbing it in the faces of anyone who's sick of the hero shooter genre. But I'm not just here to talk about why Concord's reveal fell flat. On the topic of Overwatch, I was left thinking about Overwatch's original reveal over 9 years ago, all the way back at BlizzCon 2014. It also started with a CGI trailer and was later followed up by gameplay and presentations going into the details. And despite where Overwatch is now, no one can change history, and history shows that Overwatch's build-up and launch was incredible, even going on to win Game of the Year at the 2016 Game Awards, which don't really indicate quality, but it speaks volumes for Overwatch's popularity at the time. So, where did Overwatch go right where Concord went wrong? We need a little extra context. When Overwatch was first announced, there was already a lot of excitement and expectations going into it. From what I could tell looking into Blizzard's development history, Overwatch was the first brand new IP released from Blizzard since StarCraft in 1998, not including spin-offs like World of Warcraft or Heroes of the Storm, which was still in development at the time of Overwatch's announcement. Overwatch had also been born from the long-rumored Project Titan, which was officially cancelled in 2013 after being in development since 2007. Much of the foundation and work into Titan was later repurposed and refocused into Overwatch, so there was quite a big set of expectations for the game before it was ever even formally announced. Another thing to consider is that at the time, Blizzard was still seen as a reputable company known for creating some of the most important video games ever for the PC, so expectations were always going to be high for whatever their next big project would be after Warcraft, StarCraft, and Diablo. But I think a major selling point and success for Overwatch began with its initial reveal. Let's examine how Concord's reveal failed, where Overwatch succeeded.
Conflict.
From the beginning, Overwatch immediately starts off with an intro narration and gorgeous artwork of some great character design to draw us into the world. It gives a great starting impression, as when you first watch the trailer, there's almost so much to look at that your eyes don't know where to start. Is that a gorilla? A cowboy? What matters is that your eyes are being drawn into the characters, which are very much supposed to be the highlight for both of these reveals. Later, we change into a colorful CGI art style that would fit right in with a big budget Pixar film. Overwatch's trailer holds up perfectly from a visual standpoint, and this is a strength that Blizzard has had ever since they've made a name for themselves. To me, their cinematic trailers have always felt like the gold standard that other game trailers hope to live up to, and Overwatch's introduction to the world was no exception. Overwatch's trailer doesn't just introduce its setting and characters, but also tells a little self-contained story between these two brothers, and the hope that Overwatch inspires in them. But before we continue with them, with stellar character work, we can immediately figure out everything we need to know about these characters. Even if you were to remove all the dialogue, the expressiveness and animation alone is wonderful. The rest of the trailer is fun, exciting, and doesn't overstay its welcome. It highlights this world beautifully, and at the very end ties the whole little story together in a cute and quiet moment that excites the audience and the characters themselves with the promise of the amazing heroes that Overwatch has waiting for you. Overwatch's trailer is great and introduces you to the world and characters in a way that feels sincere character and well thought out. It almost feels effortless with all the things they get right. Concord immediately starts off with a nice disclaimer about needing both a PlayStation Network account and PlayStation Plus membership, so you know, off to a wonderful start with that one. Good job, Sony. I wonder if they'll kill this game the same way they tried with Helldivers. Moving on to the actual trailer itself, we start off with what I guess is supposed to be a comedic slow-mo shot of some characters before we zoom back to the actual present. Now, I'm not going to harp on this intro shot for too long, but I think first impressions are very important. This is a brand new universe, and you have to earn the player's interest. Overwatch drew me in with some cliche narration, but the gorgeous artwork and pacing immediately lures you in. The second a character is shown on screen, and the next 20 seconds of Concord's trailer just feel too quick. And then the characters start speaking.
It wasn't the plan.
It was a spontaneous, creative decision made after years of careful research.
Almost dying is the best way to learn how not to die. Besides, it worked, didn't it?
Tight with hot sauce. You'll like it. Trust me.
No. Do not trust him.
Whoa. Where's this coming from?
It's coming from you back on the ship saying, trust me, professionals. We'll stick to the plan. You can do this.
The dialogue here feels like it's trying to set a record for most quips delivered in a 60-second period. I remember watching the livestream and seeing comments in the chat comparing Concord unfavorably to Guardians of the Galaxy, and I couldn't imagine a more appropriate comparison. Concord feels like it's desperately trying to emulate a different property, whereas Overwatch feels like it completely owns its style whilst drawing inspiration from animation studios like Pixar. And look, humor is subjective. I'm not here to tell you what you should find funny, but Concord's trailer is having a horrible reception. And I think a big reason for that is the writing in the trailer just didn't land for me, and many others. It feels like a retread of something that everyone has already seen dozens of times now, in other games, and especially in the biggest blockbuster films of the past 10 years. Another important thing to mention is setting expectations. Concord's trailer and Overwatch's trailer both seek to accomplish the same goal, introduce the player to the world and characters, but they both have a different focus. Concord feels like we're watching a 5-minute segment from a longer, full-length feature film, whereas Overwatch very much feels like its own short film, telling its own complete but brief story. What do I mean by this? Well, Concord's trailer has much more dialogue and writing for the characters, with a small little action sequence. Looking at the main action sequence in Concord's trailer, we see that it lasts for just about 90 seconds, maybe 2 minutes if we're being generous, from the start of this conflict at the bar all the way to the main heroes escaping on their ship. If we compare to Overwatch, the bulk of the action lasts for about 3 minutes, from Winston crashing into the ceiling all the way to when Reaper and Widow escape. So what does this mean? Well, Overwatch's trailer devotes more trailer time to the big action scene with less dialogue. Instead, a lot of character personality is shown through their actions as much as their words. Concord's reliance on dialogue and character interactions through most of the trailer sets up the expectation that it would be some kind of linear story with an emphasis on writing, but that's not the kind of game it is. Even though there are some similarities between the two trailers, Overwatch's feels much more like an appropriate trailer for what the game actually is, a competitive hero shooter. Concord unfortunately doesn't stick the landing with the expectations set forth. Not for me, and I imagine certainly not for others. Even though they introduced Concord in the state of play as a multiplayer game,
this team brings together some of the most talented developers in our industry, with an incredible pedigree in the online multiplayer space.
I was still left confused by that trailer itself. Despite it having a healthy dose of showing off character abilities like shields, fireballs, and unique weapons, the obvious comparisons to something like Guardians of the Galaxy sends mixed messages, so it's no surprise for much of the audience to expect it to at least adopt the narrative approach of a more cinematic linear experience. As the trailer continues, any moments of tension don't really land, the humor continues to fall flat, all the way to the very end of the trailer, and then it's over without any kind of exciting prospect about future characters or story beats or anything. And this final point comes down to preference, but the realistic CGI art style of Concord isn't nearly as interesting or appealing compared to the style of Overwatch. And we're at a point now where a very realistic CGI trailer isn't enough to sell a game anymore, especially because Blizzard themselves have basically already perfected high-end CGI visuals in their cinematic trailers, and they accomplished this over 15 years ago. The trailer for Wrath of the Lich King is still one of the coolest animated sequences ever. To put it simply, Overwatch's trailer makes me want to return to it, whereas Concord's trailer feels as forgettable as dozens of other CGI trailers I've seen in the past that did nothing to excite me in the games they were trying to sell. But again, I'd argue most of that comes down to my personal taste of seeing gameplay trailers over CGI. Speaking of which, I'll briefly touch on the gameplay reveals and how Overwatch once again succeeds where Concord fails. Now, I used to be a big fan of Overwatch. I like the hero shooter genre, and I would argue that I'm more open to the idea of a new hero shooter than most other people. But even then, Concord's gameplay trailer didn't succeed in in winning me over. Overwatch's trailer shines from the first frames, highlighting the distinct art style and showcasing the nice variety in characters, both in visual design and gameplay. And hey, if there's one thing Overwatch has always had going for it, it's the characters. When Overwatch dies, the characters will continue to live on, for better or worse. The character abilities are very clear and distinct, even if some of them are incredibly outdated from what Overwatch resembles today. And we're constantly moving between characters and between the different maps that are all visually distinct as well. Overwatch's gameplay trailer is nice and paced quickly, showing enough distinct characters that I imagine most people would be interested in trying the game out. Concord's trailer immediately highlights the visual style of the game, which is vibrant and with really sharp visuals, but it does bring to mind Lawbreakers, and how the realistic style and visual clutter of that game led to it struggling to stand out compared to the simplified visuals of Overwatch, or other similar games like Valorant. It'll be hard to judge Concord's visual design for now, but there's a reason why Overwatch and Valorant have the visual style they do. Clarity is incredibly important for any competitive game, as well as optimization. The characters look like they have nice distinction with some of their tools and abilities, but man, I can't put my finger on it, but these characters just don't have the sauce. It's hard to tell at first because the trailer doesn't have many moments to stop and take in the character designs, but from a distance, some of these characters just blend together. The bigger, less humanoid characters are a bit easier to identify, but the more humanoid ones just lack a certain effortless charm that Overwatch completely nailed. Even if you were to look at the extended developer interview from the State of Play that highlights extra characters and abilities, it still doesn't click with me, and leaves me yearning for some greater variety. As the trailer progresses, it struggles to highlight more characters with more distinct weapons compared to Overwatch's reveal, which had melee characters and full medics with a focus on healing. Overwatch's gameplay trailer highlights most of the heroes in the initial starting roster, whereas Concord feels like it's holding too much back from the audience. I also still worry about visual clarity as the trailer progresses, as some characters don't feel like they contrast enough with the environment to make for a fun gameplay loop, but we'll have to see how that turns out when the game releases later this year. I can only speak for myself, but Overwatch's reveal and lead up to release felt like Blizzard was incredibly confident and proud, and that they knew that they had a smash hit on their hands. Concord is the first release from Firewalk Studios that unfortunately just didn't land with the general audience the same way that Overwatch did, and much of that can come down to the fact that the industry is in a very different place than it was nearly 10 years ago when Overwatch was first revealed. Standards have changed for what games are expected to be, but general tastes have changed as well. When Overwatch was once at the top of the gaming space in 2016, it now struggles after years of disappointing fans and failing to keep its many promises. Many gamers don't want another hero shooter after the disappointment that Overwatch has now turned out to be, and also the rejection of a game like Valorant, which, while popular, has many who don't enjoy it for what it is, as I would argue that Overwatch and Valorant are very different from one another. If Overwatch ended up like where it is now, with the incredible launch it had, what does that say for Concord, in an age where live service games come and go in the blink of an eye? If you're gonna make a trailer for your game, I think a gameplay trailer is always the smartest step first. I find that many CGI trailers used to announce brand new IP are a misstep in exciting players, but I know that they're mainly used for a lot of studios in order to attract talent. But despite that, I can't even count the amount of times I've zoned out of watching a CGI trailer for a brand new game because of how badly I just wanted to see actual gameplay. If a game is going to use a CGI trailer for its reveal, it can't just be a trailer. It has to convince us why we should be invested in the world, since that's really all a CGI trailer is good for. Concord's uninspired design and writing that feels like it's trying to emulate a Marvel movie didn't succeed in winning many people over, let alone the later disappointing reveal that it would turn out to be another multiplayer game that is just as likely to be taken offline by this time next year or the year after that. I don't wish for Concord's failure or the failure of Firewalk Studios, but right now, they have their work cut out for them. They've got a lot to prove, so only time will tell where Concord falls in the long history of live service games introduced this past generation. But one thing's for certain, regardless of the quality of their games or their very troubled business, nothing hits quite the same as a Blizzard cinematic trailer.
Don't joke about something like this.
Our next job is somewhere with less scaffolding.
No scaffolding. Zero scaffolding. I promise. We were apart for so long. I thought I'd never feel your fiery embrace again. You fucking